My husband stood there looking like he had just won the lottery, holding his pen like a trophy. I signed it all away. The 5-bedroom house, the 2 cars, every single share of the company. Then I looked him dead in the eye and whispered, "Thank you." His mistress laughed, but when the judge read the final clause, Sam's smile died instantly, as if someone had just cut the power to the whole room. My name is Delilah Wright, and as I walked into the Sonoran County Family Court that morning, I felt less like a woman about to end a marriage and more like a surgeon stepping into an operating theater. It was a blistering Tuesday in late August, the kind of Arizona heat that dries the moisture from your eyes before you can even blink. The air conditioning inside the courthouse was humming a low, industrial drone, battling a temperature outside that had already hit 110 degrees by 9 in the morning. I was 35 years old. I was wearing a charcoal dress that I had bought 5 years ago, one that Sam used to say made me look like a librarian. Today, that was exactly the point. I wanted to look small. I wanted to look defeated. I wanted to look like a woman who had been crushed under the weight of her husband's magnificent, suffocating success. Sam Walker stood at the other table, looking like he had just stepped out of a Forbes photo shoot. He was wearing the navy bespoke suit I had picked out for him last Christmas, the one with the silk lining that cost more than my first car. He was leaning against the oak table, whispering something to his attorney, Duncan Hale. Duncan was a man who charged $600 an hour to destroy lives, and right now, he looked bored. They both did. They thought this was a victory lap. My own lawyer, Naomi, sat beside me. She was stiff, her posture rigid. To anyone watching, it looked like she was terrified on my behalf. She kept shifting her papers, her knuckles white as she gripped a pen. Every few seconds, she would tap my arm gently, a silent code we had never discussed but that everyone in the room interpreted as a warning. "Stop. Don't do this. Fight back." But I remained perfectly still. The judge, a weary man named Honorable Justice Miller, adjusted his glasses and looked down at the settlement agreement. It was thick. We had skipped mediation. We had skipped the shouting matches. I had simply told Naomi to draft the surrender. "Ms. Wright," the judge said, his voice gravelly, "I want to make sure you understand the terms of this stipulation. You are waiving your right to the primary residence at Juniper Hills. Is that correct?" I stood up. My legs felt solid, rooted to the cheap carpet. "Yes, Your Honor. The house, the crown jewel of Sam's ego. 5 bedrooms, 6 baths, a zero-edge pool that looked out over the valley, and a kitchen with marble imported from Italy. It was the house where I had spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how a life could look so full from the outside and feel so empty from the inside. And you are relinquishing all claims to the 2 vehicles currently in Mr. Walker's possession," the judge continued. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice did not shake. The Range Rover and the vintage Porsche. Sam loved those cars more than he loved Sunday mornings, and most significantly, the judge paused, looking over the rim of his glasses. "You are surrendering any and all interest in Walker Dynamics and its subsidiary holdings, including all current and future stock options." The room went silent. This was the suicide move. This was the moment where a normal ex-wife would scream, demand her share, demand half of the empire she had helped build by keeping the domestic front flawless while he played CEO. I looked across the aisle. Sam was trying to suppress a smile. He looked at me with a pity that made my stomach turn. It was that specific look he reserved for people he considered beneath his intellect waiters, valet drivers, and now, me. He mouthed 2 words to me, "Fresh start." I looked back at the judge. "Yes, Your Honor. I want him to have it all." Behind me, in the gallery, I heard a sharp intake of breath. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Marjorie, my mother-in-law, was sitting in the front row. She was likely clutching her pearls, not out of shock, but out of sheer, unadulterated glee. She had spent 8 years telling Sam he could do better, that I was too quiet, too plain, too unconnected. Today was her coronation day as much as his. and next to her sat Tessa Vaughn. Tessa was 24, perhaps 25. She was technically Sam's brand consultant, but everyone in the Phoenix business circuit knew she was the reason Sam had started working late on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She was holding her phone up, angling it subtly. She was taking a picture. She was actually documenting my divorce hearing for her private Instagram story. She wore a white dress that was a little too short for court, looking like she was ready for a brunch that would celebrate my erasure. The court clerk began to read the inventory of assets into the record. It was a litany of wealth. The property located at 4216 Camelback Lane, valued at $2.8 million. Accepted, I said. The investment portfolio managed by Chase Private Client, valued at roughly $400,000. Accepted. The intellectual property rights and controlling interest in Walker Dynamics. Accepted. My lawyer, Naomi, let out a shaky breath. She looked at me, her eyes wide, to the room. She looked like an attorney watching her client commit financial harakiri. But I knew Naomi. I knew that look wasn't fear, it was anticipation. Sam's lawyer, Duncan, smirked. He leaned over to Sam and whispered loud enough for me to hear. "This is the easiest billable hour of my life." Sam chuckled, a rich, throaty sound. He thought I was broken. He thought I was signing everything away because I just wanted to escape. Or perhaps because I was too stupid to understand the value of equity. He thought I was the same woman who nodded politely at his dinner parties while he interrupted my stories to correct my facts. The judge looked at me one last time. "Ms. Wright, once you sign this decree, it is final. There is no cooling-off period for a division of assets this comprehensive. You are leaving this marriage with your personal effects, your vehicle, and primary custody of your son, Eli. You are walking away with zero financial assets from the marital estate. Are you absolutely certain?" I looked at Sam. He was checking his watch. A Patek Philippe I had bought him for his 40th birthday. He was probably calculating how fast he could get to the country club for a tea time. I picked up the pen. It was a cheap, blue ballpoint that was tethered to the table by a little silver chain. "I am certain," I said. I bent down and signed my name, Delilah Marie Wright. The scratch of the pen against the paper sounded like a thunderclap in the quiet room. I signed the main page. I signed the 3 duplicates. I initialed the bottom of every page of the asset schedule. Sam stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked magnanimous. He looked like a king who had just conquered a village without firing a shot. He walked toward the center of the room to sign his copy. I capped the pen. I looked straight at him. The distance between us was only 5 feet, but it felt like an ocean. "Thank you," I said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't sarcastic. It was clear, enunciated, and utterly sincere. The room froze. Marjorie stopped fanning herself. Tessa's thumb hovered over her phone screen. The judge looked up from his file. Sam paused, his pen hovering over the paper. He frowned, just for a fraction of a second. Why would I thank him? Was I grateful for the scraps? Was I thankful to be rid of him? He shook it off, arrogance reclaiming his face. "You're welcome, Delilah," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I hope you find what you're looking for." He signed, with a flourish, a big, looping signature that took up 2 lines. It was done. Sam turned to shake Duncan's hand. Marjorie let out a little laugh of triumph. Tessa finally posted her photo. But then, the atmosphere shifted. It started with Duncan Hale. Sam's lawyer was gathering the signed documents, stacking them neatly to place into his leather briefcase. He was smiling, likely thinking about the lunch reservation he had at Steak 44. But then, his thumb caught on the edge of the document the specific version Naomi had filed, and Sam had just signed. Duncan paused. He flipped to page 22. I watched his face. I had played this moment in my head 1,000 times over the last 6 months. I had rehearsed it while washing dishes, while driving Eli to school, while lying in bed next to a man who smelled like another woman's vanilla perfume. Duncan's smile didn't fade. It vanished. It was replaced by a look of confusion. Then frantic reading. His eyes darted left and right, scanning the paragraphs. He flipped the page. Then he flipped back. His face went from a healthy flush to the color of old ash. "Sam," Duncan said. His voice was different now. It was tight, high-pitched. Sam was busy winking at Tessa. "What is it? We're done." "Right?" Duncan didn't answer. He looked at the judge, then at Naomi, and finally, he looked at me. For the first time in the entire proceedings. Duncan Hale looked at me not as a housewife, but as a threat. He looked at the clause Sam had just executed, the clause that was buried deep in the legal definitions of the asset transfer. "Sam," Duncan said again, and this time, there was panic in his tone. "Didn't you read the indemnity schedule on page 24? What? Sam laughed. Oblivious. "You read it, Duncan? That's what I pay you for." Duncan's hands were shaking. I saw the paper tremble. "Delilah," Duncan said, turning to me, "we need to recess. There has been a mistake." I stood up slowly. I smoothed the wrinkles on my charcoal dress. "There is no mistake. Mr. Hale," I said softly, "the judge just confirmed it. It is final." Sam finally sensed the change in air pressure. The smile slid off his face like oil off water. He looked at his lawyer, then at the document. "What? What is going on?" Duncan whispered something to him. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Sam's lips form the shape of them. Total liability assumption. Sam looked up at me. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the sheer, animalistic fear of a man who realizes the ground he is standing on is actually a trapdoor. The silence in the room was heavy, electric. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the very top of its arc, just before the drop. I picked up my purse. I didn't look at Marjorie. I didn't look at Tessa. I kept my eyes locked on Sam Walker, the man who thought he had taken everything from me. He hadn't taken anything. I had given it to him. I had fed it to him, spoon by spoon, until he choked on it. But before he could fully comprehend the magnitude of what he had just won, before the screaming started, and before the bank notices began to flood his beautiful stolen life. I need to tell you how we got here. I need to tell you about the night, 3 years ago, when I couldn't sleep. The night I walked into his study looking for a permission slip for Eli's field trip, and instead, opened the wrong drawer. To understand why I thanked my husband for destroying me, you have to understand the house at Juniper Hills. It was the kind of property that real estate agents describe as a sanctuary. It had a long, winding driveway lined with imported Italian cypress trees, a front door made of reclaimed oak that cost more than my college tuition, and a living room with 20-foot ceilings that swallowed sound. From the street, it looked like the American dream had been poured into a mold and hardened into stucco and stone. For 8 years, I lived inside that dream, or rather, I maintained it. We were the Walkers, Sam and Delilah, to our neighbors. We were the golden couple of the cul-de-sac. We hosted the 4th of July barbecue every year. Sam would stand by the $6,000 grill, wearing a linen apron that remained miraculously spotless, holding a craft beer, and holding court. He would talk about market volatility and yield curves with the other husbands, his laugh booming across the manicured lawn. I would be inside, refilling the ice buckets, arranging the artisanal cheeses on slate boards, and making sure the music volume was exactly where Sam liked it audible, but not intrusive. People would come into the kitchen and tell me how lucky I was. They would run their hands over the granite countertops and say, "Delilah, you have such a beautiful life," and I would smile. I would say, "Thank you." I became very good at saying thank you for things I didn't own. That was the catch. You see, I lived in the house, but I didn't inhabit it. I was more like a highly functioning curator of Sam Walker's museum. It hadn't always been this way. Before I was the woman arranging cheese boards, I was Delilah Wright, a senior compliance officer at Crestline Audit and Risk. I spent my days hunting for discrepancies in corporate ledgers. I was good at it. I had a mind that snagged on inconsistencies like a sweater catching on a nail. I could look at a spreadsheet of 10,000 rows and tell you exactly where the money had started to leak. I made $75,000 a year, drove a Honda Civic that I paid for myself, and I had my own savings account. Then I met Sam. He was charming, ambitious, and possessed a gravitational pull that made everything else seem gray. When we got married, it felt like an upgrade. When I got pregnant with Eli a year later, Sam sat me down in our first, smaller apartment and laid out the logic. He said, "Dee, my career is taking off. I'm on the track for partner. If we pay for childcare, it eats up half your salary anyway. Why don't you stay home for a while, just until Eli is in school? You can run the house. You can be the CEO of the Walker family." It sounded reasonable. It sounded like a partnership. I didn't realize then that he wasn't asking for a partner. He was hiring a subordinate. The shift was subtle, geological in its slowness. It started with the bank accounts. When we merged our lives, Sam suggested we simplify. One main account for the household, which he managed because he was the one with the finance degree. He joked, I was given a supplementary credit card. It was attached to his account, but with a spending limit that he set. At first, the limit was generous, but over the years, as his income doubled and then tripled, my access to it shrank. I remember standing in the checkout line at Whole Foods on a Tuesday afternoon. The cart was full of organic produce, grass-fed beef, and the specific brand of sparkling water Sam liked. The total was $214. I swiped the card, declined. The cashier, a teenager with braces, looked at me with pity. Maybe try again. I tried again, declined. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sam. Spending alert. You're over the weekly budget. D, put the stakes back. He wasn't even in the state. He was at a conference in Las Vegas. Yet he was standing right there in the grocery store with me, holding my leash. I had to step out of line, my face burning with a humiliation so hot it felt like a sunburn, and abandoned the cart. When he came home, he didn't apologize. He sat me down and explained cash flow management as if I were a dim-witted intern, not a woman who used to audit Fortune 500 companies. He said, I'm just trying to make sure we hit our savings goals. Delilah, you don't have to worry about the big picture. I handle the stress. You just handle the house. So I did. I handled the house. I handled the leaking faucets by calling the plumber he approved. I handled the landscaping by supervising the crew he hired. I handled his image, and I handled Eli. Eli was 7 years old now. He was a quiet boy, sensitive, with eyes that watched everything. Sam loved Eli in the abstract. He loved the idea of a son. He loved taking photos with Eli in matching polo shirts for the Christmas card. He called Eli his little man and his legacy, but Sam didn't know Eli. Sam didn't know that Eli was afraid of thunderstorms. He didn't know that Eli's favorite color was orange, not blue. He didn't know that Eli struggled with reading aloud because he got nervous. I remember one evening when Eli had a fever of 102. I was up all night, changing cool washcloths on his forehead, whispering to him that it would be okay. Sam was in the guest room because he had a big presentation the next morning and needed his rest. The next day, Sam came home early, not to check on Eli, but because he had bought a new set of golf clubs, he called Eli downstairs. Look at this, buddy, Sam said, holding up a driver that cost more than my entire wardrobe. One day, you and I are going to tear up the course. Eli stood there, swaying slightly from the fever, trying to smile for his father. Sam didn't even notice the boy's glassy eyes. He just clapped Eli on the shoulder, a little too hard, and said, Go get dressed. We need a photo for my Facebook. That was the dynamic. Eli was a prop. I was a prop manager. The loneliness of my marriage wasn't about being alone. I was rarely alone. I had Eli. I had the housekeeper who came twice a week. I had the other wives in the neighborhood who wanted to get coffee and complain about their renovations. No, the loneliness was about being unseen. It was the feeling of screaming underwater. As Sam's career skyrocketed, the gap between us widened physically. He started upgrading himself. He bought tailored Italian suits that fit him like a second skin. He started going to a high-end barber who charged $80 for a shave. He bought a vintage Porsche 911 and spent his weekends polishing it with a diaper. Meanwhile, I was fading. I stopped buying new clothes because asking for the money felt like begging. I wore yoga pants and oversized sweaters. I cut my own hair over the bathroom sink to save $60. One night, we were getting ready for a gala at his firm. I put on a black dress I had owned for 4 years. It was a little tight around the waist. Sam walked into the bedroom, adjusting his silk tie in the mirror. He watched me struggle with the zipper in the reflection. He didn't turn around to help. He just said, "You know, Dee, maybe you should join a gym. Or get a facial. You're looking a little tired. It reflects on me. You know." He said it casually, while checking his emails. As if my exhaustion was a moral failing. As if the reason I looked tired wasn't because I was raising his son, cleaning his house, and managing his life while he treated me like a line item in a budget he wanted to cut. I looked at him in the mirror. He looked polished, expensive, and vibrant. I looked like his shadow. That comment was a turning point. It wasn't an explosion. It was a click. The sound of a lock tumbling into place. I realized he didn't want a wife. He wanted a mirror that would reflect his own success back at him at double the size. And because I was starting to look like a real human being with flaws and fatigue, I was becoming a defective mirror. I needed insurance. I didn't leave him then. I couldn't. I had no money, no credit history of my own for the last 7 years, and no recent job experience. If I left, he would crush me in court. He would take Eli. He had the best lawyers in the city on speed dial. So, I went underground. I reached out to an old colleague from Crestline, a woman named Sarah who had started her own boutique compliance firm. I asked her if she had any grunt work, data entry, basic verification, things I could do at night after Sam and Eli were asleep. She was surprised. "Delilah, I thought you were living the high life. Why do you need $20 an hour work?" I told her I was bored. I told her I wanted to keep my brain sharp. I didn't tell her I was terrified. She gave me a contract. It was small, just a few hours a week. I set up a workspace in the corner of the laundry room. It was the only place Sam never entered. He didn't even know how to operate the washing machine. I would sit there on top of the dryer, my laptop balanced on a pile of towels, reviewing audit logs while the spin cycle hummed beneath me. One Saturday, Sam came home early from golf and found me there. I didn't close the laptop in time. "What's this?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe, smelling of grass and scotch. I froze. "I'm just doing a little consulting, helping a friend." He laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, which made it worse. It was an amused laugh. "Consulting." He walked over and looked at the screen. "Data verification, honey. That's data entry. How much are they paying you?" I swallowed. $25 an hour. Sam shook his head, smiling as he walked away. "Well, if it keeps you entertained, just don't let it interfere with dinner. We have the partners coming over at 7. He didn't see it as a job. He saw it as a hobby. He saw it as me playing office, like a child plays house. He was so arrogant, so secure in his financial dominance, that he couldn't imagine a world where $25 an hour could threaten him. He didn't know that every single dollar I earned went into a digital bank account he didn't know existed. He didn't know that I was relearning the new regulations. He didn't know that the data entry was sharpening the knife I had let rust for 8 years. He thought he had put me in a cage, and he had. But he forgot that I was the one who knew how to pick locks. I just needed the right key. And I kept waiting, watching, and saving. I played the part of the grateful wife. I nodded when he talked about his genius investments. I signed the tax returns he put in front of me without reading them, because that's what a good wife did. Until the night I went looking for Eli's school forms. It was a Thursday. Sam was at a client dinner that had gone on past midnight. The house was silent. I needed a permission slip for the zoo trip, and I thought Sam might have swept it up with his mail. I walked into his home office. The air smelled of stale coffee and leather. His desk was a massive slab of mahogany, cluttered with deal memos. I checked the top drawer, pens, golf tees. I checked the middle drawer, stationery. Then I tried the bottom drawer, the deep one, the one he always kept locked. Usually, he kept the key on his keyring, but tonight, in his rush to get to his dinner, He had left his spare keys on the corner of the desk. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity instinct. Or maybe it was just the years of being treated like a child that made me want to see what the adults were hiding. I picked up the key. It was small, brass, and cold. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I pulled the drawer open. It wasn't school papers. It was a graveyard of red ink. I saw notices from banks I had never heard of. I saw letters from the IRS marked urgent. I saw promissory notes. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. What stopped my heart was seeing my own name. There, on a document for a commercial line of credit worth $400,000. Was the signature of Delilah Marie Wright. It was a good forgery. It had my loop on the D and the sharp cross on the T. But I hadn't signed it. I sat down on the floor, the carpet rough against my legs. I pulled out another file, another loan, another signature that wasn't mine. I wasn't just a prop in his life. I was his collateral, the golden life, the house, the cars, the suits. It was all a shell game. And Sam had been using my credit, my identity, and my future to keep the lights on. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. I didn't cry. The time for crying was over. The auditor was back. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and switched it to camera mode. I started taking pictures. The adrenaline that flooded my system wasn't the hot, panic-induced rush of a woman catching her husband with another woman. It was colder. It was the icy, clinical focus of a professional who has just found the smoking gun in a room full of corpses. I sat on the plush carpet of Sam's study, the heavy oak drawer before me like a gaping mouth, and I felt the shift happen, the weeping. Neglected wife died in that moment. The auditor was resurrected. I reached for the first file folder. It was thick, manila, and labeled simply with the year 2024. Inside, the papers were disorganized, shoved in with a carelessness that betrayed Sam's state of mind. Sam was a man who color-coded his socks, yet here were documents crumpled at the corners, coffee stains ringing important clauses, and sticky notes with frantic scribbles. I picked up a letter stamped with red ink. It was from a vendor, a major supplier of microchips for the guidance systems Walker Dynamics manufactured. The header was bold, aggressive, final demand for payment. The amount listed was $234,000.62. It was dated 3 months ago. I turned the page. There was a response letter from Sam's office, dated 2 days later. It was smooth, apologetic, claiming a banking error and promising an immediate wire transfer. But stapled behind it was another letter from the vendor, dated last week, threatening legal action and a lien on the company's inventory. The wire transfer had never happened. My heart began to hammer a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I wasn't looking at a cash flow problem. I was looking at an insolvency event. I moved to the next file. This one was thinner, labeled Southwest Commercial Lending. I knew this bank. They were a second-tier lender, the kind you went to when the big banks like Chase or Wells Fargo had already said no. They charged higher interest, but they asked fewer questions. I opened the loan agreement. It was for a revolving line of credit. $500,000? I scanned the terms. The interest rate was variable, currently sitting at 12%. That was predatory for a business loan in this economy, but it was the security clause that made the breath catch in my throat. Borrower agrees to pledge all personal and real property as additional collateral. I felt a wave of nausea. Real property. That meant the house in Juniper Hills that I thought we owned outright, or at least had significant equity in. Sam had told me years ago that he was paying down the mortgage aggressively. He had lied. He wasn't paying it down. He was using it as an ATM. Then I saw it. The document that turned this from a financial disaster into a crime scene. It was a spousal consent and guarantee form. In Arizona, a community property state, a lender often requires the spouse to sign off on major debts incurred by one partner if the community assets are being leveraged. The signature line at the bottom had a date, March 12, 2025, and there, in blue ink, was my name. Delilah M. Wright. I brought the paper closer to the desk lamp, my hand trembling slightly. I forced myself to stop shaking. I needed to be steady. I needed to see the ink. I studied the signature. To the untrained eye, it was perfect. It had the slight loop on the D that I had adopted in high school. It had the sharp, decisive cross on the T at the end. But I knew my hand. I knew the muscle memory of my own name. The pressure on the downstroke of the W was too heavy. The flow was just a fraction of a second too slow. As if the person writing it was being careful not to make a mistake. It was a forgery. Sam had sat at this desk, perhaps sipping the scotch I had poured him, and he had practiced my signature until he could steal my financial future without my consent. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the lamp against the wall. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my iPhone. I checked the settings. Flash off. HDR on. I stood up and positioned the phone directly over the document. I made sure the lighting was even, casting no shadows over the text. I tapped the screen to focus on the signature. Click. I turned the page to the notary section. The notary stamp belonged to a woman named Linda K. Johnson. I knew that name. She was the administrative assistant at Sam's office. She was a woman who sent me Christmas cards every year and complimented my brownies. She had notarized a signature she never saw me write. That was fraud. That was a felony. Click. I moved faster now, but with method. I wasn't just taking pictures. I was building a case file. I photographed the loan amount. Click. I photographed the date. Click. I photographed the paragraph that explicitly listed the primary residence located at 1404 Desert Ridge Drive as collateral. Click. I put the folder down and picked up another. This one was darker. It wasn't a bank loan. It was a promissory note between Sam Walker and a private entity called Vantage Holdings, LLC. I read the terms. $150,000. Interest rate 18%. Due in full in 6 months. 18%. That wasn't a business loan. That was a loan shark with a registered LLC. I flipped to the back. There was no spousal consent form here, but there was a personal guarantee. I, Samuel Walker, personally guarantee the repayment of this note and pledge my entire personal estate as security, waiving any and all homestead exemptions. He had waived the homestead exemption. He had stripped away the one legal protection that kept a roof over Eli's head if the business failed. I took a picture of the clause. I took a picture of his signature. I realized then that Sam wasn't just failing. He was drowning, and like a drowning man. He was grabbing onto anything that floated to keep his head above water. I was the raft. Eli was the raft. The house was the raft. He was willing to pull us all down into the dark just to get one more breath of air. One more month of pretending he was the king of Phoenix. I checked the timestamp on my phone. 2:45 in the morning. I had to stop. If he came home and found me, the game was over before it began. He would gaslight me. He would say I didn't understand business. He would say it was temporary. Or worse, he would destroy the evidence. I looked at the mess I had made on the floor. I closed my eyes for 3 seconds, visualizing the drawer exactly as it had been when I opened it. The yellow file was on top, angled slightly to the left. The red pen was resting on the lip of the drawer, not inside it. The paper clip on the Crestline folder was slightly bent. I began the reconstruction. I placed the Vantage Holdings file at the bottom. I stacked the Southwest Commercial file on top of it. I smoothed out the corner of the vendor letter I had accidentally creased. I placed the yellow file on top, tilting it just so. I closed the drawer. It slid shut on silent, well-oiled tracks. I picked up the brass key. I wiped it with the hem of my shirt to remove my fingerprints. It was paranoia. Perhaps, but paranoia was the only friend I had left in this room. I placed the key back on the corner of the desk, exactly where he had left it, next to a coaster stained with a ring of single malt. I backed out of the room. I turned off the light. The hallway was dark and quiet. I walked to the bedroom, my feet sinking into the carpet that I now knew we didn't really own. I climbed into bed. The sheets were cool. Egyptian cotton. Thread count 600. They felt like a shroud. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan spinning its lazy circles in the dark. Sam came home an hour later. I heard the garage door rumble beneath the floorboards. I heard the heavy thud of the front door. I heard his footsteps on the stairs heavy, dragging slightly. He was tired. Being a fraud was exhausting work. He came into the bedroom. He smelled of cigar smoke and that expensive, musky cologne he wore to intimidate people. He stripped off his clothes in the dark, tossing his shirt onto the chair. He climbed into bed beside me. He reached out and draped an arm over my waist. His hand was heavy. It was the hand that had forged my name. It was the hand that had signed away our son's security. I didn't flinch. I forced my breathing to remain slow and rhythmic, the deep, even breaths of deep sleep. "Love you, babe," he mumbled into my hair, his voice slurring slightly with alcohol and fatigue. The words made my skin crawl. It wasn't love, it was ownership. He loved me the way a man loves a reliable car or a diversified portfolio. I was an asset, and right now, I was a depreciating one. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in the dark, and I did math. I calculated the total debt I had seen, roughly $880,000 in immediate, high-risk liabilities. I calculated the equity in the house, maybe $1.2 million if the market held. I calculated the value of his car, his watch, his stocks, and then I ran the scenario. Scenario A, I confront him. We fight. He denies it. He hides the rest of the papers. He freezes the accounts. He hires Duncan Hale, the shark lawyer, and they paint me as unstable. I get nothing. The debt swallows the assets during the divorce, and I walk away with half of zero. Scenario B. I stay. I help him. We scrimp and save. We sell the house. We pay off the debts. I spend the next 10 years cleaning up his mess, only for him to do it again because men like Sam never learn. They only leverage. Scenario C. I let him win. The idea bloomed in my mind like a black flower. If I divorced him now, under normal circumstances, a judge would split the assets and the debts 50-50. I would be saddled with half of that $800,000. The bank would come after me for the signature on the spousal consent form. I would be bankrupt within a year. But what if I didn't fight for the assets? What if I let him keep the house? If he kept the house, he kept the mortgage attached to it. If he kept the company, he kept the vendor debts. If he kept the accounts, he kept the lines of credit. The law was specific about asset distribution, but it was even more specific about indemnification. If one party takes an asset, they can be made to assume the liability attached to it, provided the other party waives all claim to the value. I rolled over, turning my back to him. He was snoring now, a soft, arrogant snore. He thought he was safe. He thought his secrets were locked in a drawer that only he had the key to. He thought his wife was asleep, dreaming of PTA meetings and grocery lists. He didn't know that his wife was gone. Delilah the housewife had left the building. In her place lay a woman who was remembering every single clause of the Uniform Commercial Code she had ever studied. I wasn't going to save our marriage. I wasn't even going to save myself. I was going to save Eli. And to do that, I had to sever the limb to save the body. I needed to make Sam feel powerful. I needed to make him feel like he was discarding me. I needed to feed his ego until it was so bloated that it blinded him to the fine print. I stared at the moonlight filtering through the curtains. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. Let him have the house, the voice in my head whispered. Let him have the cars. Let him have the company. Let him have the debt. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt a sense of peace. It was a dark, jagged kind of peace. But it was real. Tomorrow, I would call Brooke. Tomorrow, I would start moving money. But tonight, I would let him sleep. He needed his rest. He had a very expensive divorce to pay for. Panic is a novice's error. In the world of high-level compliance and risk management, when you find a discrepancy in the ledger, you do not scream, you do not alert the suspect, you simply widen your sample size, you calibrate your instruments, you begin the audit. The morning after I found the files in the drawer, I didn't pack a bag. I made Sam his coffee black, 2 sugars, and kissed him on the cheek before he left for the office. I watched his Tesla back out of the driveway, And then I picked up the phone. I called Brooke Harlan. Brooke and I had survived the same accounting program at Arizona State almost 15 years ago. She had gone into retail banking while I went into corporate audit. Now, she was a senior risk analyst at a credit union in Scottsdale, the kind of place that prided itself on knowing its members by name, not just by credit score. I didn't tell her everything over the phone. I just asked her to meet me for lunch at a diner on the far side of the valley, a place with vinyl seats and greasy spoons where none of the Juniper Hills wives would ever be caught dead. When I slid into the booth across from her, I didn't look like a victim. I had brought a folder. Not the stolen documents, I wasn't stupid enough to transport those, but a list of questions. Brooke took one look at my face and put down her menu. "Delilah," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you look like you're ready to indict someone. I need a favor." I said, "I need you to run a soft pull on my credit, and I need you to do a deep trace on any lien associations with my social security number." Brooke hesitated. "You know I can't do that without an official application." It leaves a digital footprint." "I know." I said, "That's why I need you to run it as a pre-qualification for a car loan. I'll fill out the paperwork right now. Deny me later. Just get me the data." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. She pulled a tablet out of her bag. 10 minutes later, she turned the screen toward me. Her face was pale. "It's messy." She said. I looked at the numbers. My credit score, which had been a pristine 800 when we married, was hovering in the mid-600s. But it was the trade lines section that made my stomach clench. There were 5 active inquiries in the last 6 months. There were 3 credit cards I didn't have in my wallet. And there was the big one, a secondary lien on the house that had been filed just 4 weeks ago. He forged my name on the modification. I said flatly. Brooke gasped. "You have to go to the police. This is identity theft. No police." I said, "Not yet. If I call the cops, they freeze the assets. If they freeze the assets, the creditors panic and call in the loans. The house of cards falls, and Eli and I are standing underneath it. I need time to get out from under the rubble before I pull the support beam." That lunch was the beginning of my double life. For the next 3 years, I became an actress in my own home. My role was the oblivious housewife. I perfected the art of the vacuous smile. When Sam came home talking about cash flow issues or market adjustments, I would nod sympathetically and ask if he wanted chicken or fish for dinner. I played the part so well that he stopped hiding his phone when I walked into the room. He thought I was too simple to understand what the notifications from the bank meant, but while I played house, I was building a firewall. Step 1 was financial triage. I opened a checking account at an online-only bank that had no physical branches in Arizona. I opted for paperless statements sent to a new, encrypted email address that I only accessed from the library or the burner phone I bought with cash. I started siphoning money. It wasn't much I couldn't trigger an alert. When I went grocery shopping, I would get $50 cash back at the register. I would buy generic brands, but charge Sam for the premium ones, pocketing the difference in cash. When I did the freelance compliance work for my old contacts, I had them pay me via PayPal, which I then routed to the secret account. It was slow, agonizingly slow. In the first month, I saved $400. By the end of the first year, I had $5,000. It wasn't enough to buy a house, but it was enough to buy a lawyer. Step 2 was the perimeter defense. I contacted the 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. I placed a fraud alert on my file. It wasn't a full freeze. A freeze would have stopped Sam from taking out loans in my name. Yes, but it also would have alerted him immediately the next time he tried. He would have received a notification that his wife's credit was locked, and the confrontation would have happened before I was ready. Instead, the fraud alert meant that any lender issuing new credit in my name was supposed to call me at a verified number to confirm my identity. I changed that verified number to my burner phone. I carried that phone everywhere. It was a cheap, black Nokia brick that I kept hidden in a box of tampons in the bathroom cabinet. The one place I knew Sam would never, ever look. Step 3 was professional rehabilitation. I knew that if I wanted custody of Eli, I had to prove I could support him. The court would look at a jobless mother and see a dependent. They would look at a working mother and see a parent. I used the downtime when Eli was at school to study. The world of financial compliance had changed in 8 years. There were new regulations, Dodd-Frank updates, the Corporate Transparency Act, new anti-money laundering protocols. I devoured them. I took online certification courses, paying for them with my secret fund. I remember one Tuesday afternoon. Sam came home early with a headache. I was at the kitchen island, my laptop open to a module on forensic accounting and asset tracing. He walked in, loosening his tie. "What are you reading?" I felt a spike of adrenaline, but my hand was steady as I hit the shortcut key I had programmed. The screen instantly switched to a Pinterest board of modern kitchen renovations. "Just looking at backsplashes," I said, smiling. "I think the white subway tile is a bit dated. Don't you?" He chuckled, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. "God, you have an easy life. D, just don't pick anything too expensive. Cash is a little tight this quarter." I watched him drink the water. I watched the way his throat moved. He had no idea that the woman discussing tile patterns was currently certified to audit his entire existence. And that brought me to step 4, the evidence log. I treated our marriage like a corrupt corporation I was investigating from the inside. I created a master spreadsheet. It had columns: date, event, Sam's narrative, the reality, and evidence location. Entry, October 14th, 2024. Event, Sam buys a new Rolex Submariner. Sam's narrative. Got a massive performance bonus from the board. The reality. He withdrew $15,000 from the chaotic slush fund account he thought I couldn't see, causing 2 payroll checks for his employees to bounce. Evidence photo of the bounce notices found in his briefcase. Photo of the watch receipt. Entry December 2nd, 2025. Event family trip to Aspen. First-class tickets. Sam's narrative. The company is expanding. We need to celebrate. The reality. He took out a high-interest bridge loan from a private equity shark to cover the travel costs. Evidence. The promissory note crumpled in his coat pocket. As the log grew, a terrifying pattern emerged, a pattern that changed my entire strategy. I had initially thought Sam was just greedy. I thought he was hoarding money. But as I traced the inflows and outflows, I realized the truth was far more pathetic and far more dangerous. Sam wasn't hoarding money. He was burning it. He was running a personal Ponzi scheme. He used the flashiness, the cars, the suits, the parties not because he could afford them, but because he needed to look successful to qualify for the next loan. Lenders don't give money to desperate men. They give money to successful men. So Sam had to buy the Rolex to get the loan to pay the mortgage to keep the house to get the line of credit to buy the Rolex. It was a circle of death, and it was accelerating. He was refinancing the debt every 6 months, rolling the interest into the principal, ballooning the total obligation. He was cannibalizing the equity of our life. That was the moment the twist happened in my mind. Most women in my position would be fighting for half. They would be calculating how much of the house they could get, how much alimony they deserved. But I looked at the numbers, and I realized that half of the Walker estate was a negative number, if I fought for half the assets. I would legally attach myself to half the debts. If I demanded the house, I would be demanding a foreclosure. I didn't want half. I wanted 0. I wanted to be the one person in the lifeboat when the Titanic went down. I began to subtly encourage him. When he talked about buying a new boat to impress a client, I didn't say, "We can't afford it." I said, "You have to spend money to make money. Sam, you deserve it." Why? Because every new asset he bought was another anchor tied around his ankles. And every loan he signed to buy it was another document where I ensured through my vigilance and my intercepts that he either forged my signature or, better yet, signed an affidavit stating he was the sole guarantor. I became the architect of his confidence. I fed his ego until it was so fat it couldn't see its own feet. There was a night, about 3 months before the divorce filing, when the stress almost broke me. I was in the bathroom, staring at the Nokia phone. I had just received an alert that Sam had opened a new credit card with a $50,000 limit. I looked in the mirror. I looked older. The lines around my eyes were deeper. The silence of the last 3 years was heavy in my lungs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and ask him how he could sleep at night knowing he was stealing his son's future. But then I heard Eli in the next room. He was reading a book, stumbling over the words, soft and innocent. I washed my face. I applied my night cream. I put the phone back in the tampon box. I walked into the bedroom. Sam was watching CNBC. His face bathed in the blue light of the television. "Everything okay?" he asked, not looking away from the screen. "Everything is perfect," I said. "I was just thinking maybe we should upgrade your membership at the country club. The platinum level has better networking events, doesn't it?" Sam turned to me, a smile spreading across his face, a smile of pure vanity. "You know, Dee," he said, "sometimes I think you're the only one who really believes in me." I smiled back. It was the truest thing I had ever said, and the biggest lie he had ever heard. "I do believe in you, Sam," I said. "I believe you're going to get exactly what you deserve." I turned off the lamp. I wasn't taking revenge with emotion. I wasn't slashing tires or burning clothes. Those were messy. Those were temporary. I was taking revenge with structure. I was building a cage out of his own signature, bar by bar, clause by clause, and the best part was, he was handing me the welding torch and thanking me for the light. The signs of Sam's infidelity were not subtle. They were as glaring as a red flag on a compliance audit report. For a man who prided himself on his meticulous nature, Sam was sloppy with the details of his personal betrayals. It started with the schedule, the Tuesday night strategy meetings that stretched until 2 a.m, the sudden urgent business trips to scout new locations in Napa Valley, a place where Walker Dynamics had absolutely zero manufacturing interests. Then came the sensory evidence. He would come home smelling not of the office stale coffee and ozone, but of a distinct, cloying, vanilla-based perfume. It was the kind of scent that lingered on a collar, the olfactory equivalent of a territorial marking, and there were the receipts I found in his pockets before doing the laundry dinners for 2 at Nobu, totaling $400. Spa treatments at the Phoenician charged to a credit card I wasn't supposed to know about. I didn't confront him. Confrontation requires emotional investment, and I had divested my emotions from Sam Walker years ago. Instead, I cataloged the data, date November 10th, expense $412, location, the Sanctuary Resort Bar, notes, Sam claims he was at a board meeting, but the abstract data became flesh and blood on a Saturday evening in mid-January. It was my mother-in-law's 60th birthday. Marjorie lived in Mesa Ridge, a gated community where the driveways were heated and the neighbors sued each other over the height of their hedges. Marjorie had never liked me. To her, I was functional. I was the woman who kept her son's shirts pressed and produced a grandson, but I lacked the shark-like social ambition she believed Sam deserved in a partner. The party was a catered affair. Waiters in black vests circulated with trays of truffle arancini. I was in the kitchen, checking the oven for the special cake I had baked from scratch, because Marjorie claimed store-bought frosting gave her migraines. When I walked into the living room, wiping flour from my hands, the atmosphere had shifted. The air felt charged, magnetized toward the center of the room. Sam was standing by the fireplace. He was holding a glass of scotch, his posture open and preening. Standing next to him was a woman who looked like she had just stepped out of a LinkedIn advertisement for Young Executive of the Year. She was stunning. In a manufactured, high-maintenance way, her hair was a glossy sheet of chestnut, blow-dried to perfection. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that fit her with the precision of architectural drafting. She was laughing at something Sam had said, her hand resting lightly, possessively, on his forearm. I stopped. I knew who she was before he even opened his mouth. Sam saw me. He didn't look guilty. He looked excited. He waved me over with the casual gesture one might use to summon a waiter. "Delilah," he said, his voice booming. "Come here. I want you to meet someone. This is Tessa Vaughn. She's been doing some incredible strategic consulting for the firm. Truly visionary work. Tessa turned to me. Her smile was bright, practiced, and didn't reach her eyes. She scanned me my simple navy dress, my hair pulled back in a practical bun, my hands still faintly dusted with flour, and dismissed me in less than a second. "It is so lovely to meet you, Delilah," she said. Her voice was smooth, polished. "Sam talks about you occasionally." The pause was deliberate. It was a verbal slap. "Nice to meet you, Tessa," I said. My voice was even. "Sam talks about work constantly, so I feel like I already know the chaotic state of the firm's strategy." Sam's smile faltered for a microsecond. But he recovered. He laughed, a little too loud. "Oh, Delilah doesn't really follow the business side of things. Tessa, she's more of a domestic artist." Marjorie descended upon us then. She was wearing diamonds that I knew were insured for more than my parents' house. She ignored me completely and took Tessa's hands. "You must be the Tessa," Marjorie cooed. "Sam said you were the one who finally got him to upgrade the branding. The old logo was so dusty, wasn't it?" The old logo was one I had designed for Sam when he started the company in our garage. "We just wanted to modernize." "Mrs. Walker," Tessa said, beaming, "reflect the future." "Please, call me Marjorie," my mother-in-law said. She turned to me, her face hardening. "Delilah, the ice bucket on the patio is empty. Could you handle that? The caterers are busy." "Of course," I said. I walked away. I walked past my husband, who was refilling Tessa's wine glass. I walked past the guests who were whispering behind their hands. I went to the patio, filled the bucket with ice, and felt a cold, hard resolve settling in my gut. Later, at dinner, the humiliation became a spectator sport. It was a seated dinner for 12. By social convention, husbands and wives were usually separated to encourage conversation, but Sam had rearranged the place cards. He sat at the head of the table. He placed Tessa to his right. He placed me at the far end, next to Marjorie's deaf aunt. Eli, my sweet 7-year-old boy, was sitting across from me. He looked uncomfortable in his miniature blazer. He kept glancing at the head of the table. "Mom," he whispered, leaning across his plate of untouched salmon, "who is that lady next to Dad? Why isn't she sitting with the other guests?" My heart broke a little. Children are the best auditors. They notice every discrepancy in the pattern. "She works with Daddy," I said softly. "She's helping him with a big project." "She laughs really loud," Eli said, frowning. "Eat your potatoes, baby," I said. Up at the head of the table, Sam was holding court. He was using Tessa as a prop to demonstrate his own importance. "Tessa was telling me about the Asian markets," Sam announced to the table. "She thinks we're too conservative, and she's right. You know, most people don't have the stomach for real risk." "Right, Tessa. Fortune favors the bold. Sam," she said, raising her glass. Sam looked down the table at me. "You hear that? Fortune favors the bold. You were telling me last week I should be worried about the overhead. That's the difference between a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset." The table went quiet. It was an unnecessary dig. It was a public performance review of his marriage, and he was marking me as below expectations. "I think prudence has its place," I said, my voice projecting clearly down the length of the table. "Especially when the market is volatile." Tessa laughed. It was a condescending, tinkling sound. "Oh, prudence is just a fancy word for fear, isn't it?" Marjorie nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Sam needs someone who can run at his pace. He has always been a racehorse." I looked at Tessa. I really looked at her. She was young. She was arrogant. She was clearly sleeping with my husband. But as I watched her, I noticed something else. I noticed the bracelet on her wrist. It was a Cartier love bracelet. Gold. It cost about $7,000, but it wasn't screwed on properly. The alignment was slightly off. It was a fake. I looked at her handbag, resting on the floor. A Birkin. but the leather slumped in a way that genuine Togo leather never would. I looked at her shoes, red bottoms, but the scuff on the heel revealed a black plastic base, not leather. Tessa Vaughn wasn't rich. She was playing rich. She was exactly like Sam. They were two mirrors reflecting each other's vanity, creating an infinite corridor of illusions. And then, the realization hit me. She didn't know. She didn't know he was broke. She thought she had snagged a wealthy CEO. She thought she was the upgrade. She had no idea she was auditioning for a role on a sinking ship. After dinner, I went to the kitchen to help the caterers clear the dessert plates because that was my place in Marjorie's world. The kitchen had a swinging door that didn't quite close. I heard voices in the hallway. "Sam, you promised," a female voice hissed. It was Tessa. The smooth, confident tone was gone, replaced by a sharp, anxious edge. "I know, baby, I know." Sam's voice. "It's just taking a little longer to liquefy the assets." "My investors are asking questions," Tessa said. "I put my name on that bridge loan for the expansion because you said the funds from the Juniper Hills refinance would clear by Tuesday. It is Friday. Sam." I froze, a dirty dessert plate in my hand. "It's coming," Sam said, his voice dropping to a soothing, manipulative register. "Trust me, the bank is just dragging its feet on the appraisal. Once I settle things with Delilah, everything unlocks. We'll have the capital. We just need to bridge the gap for 2 more weeks. Can you sign the extension?" "Another extension." Tessa sounded panicked. "Sam, if this defaults, it hits my credit. I'm leverage heavy right now." "It won't default," Sam said. "Look at me. Look at this house. Look at the company. Do I look like a man who defaults? I just need your signature to bypass the corporate red tape. It's a formality." There was a silence, then the sound of a kiss, a desperate, transactional kiss. "Okay," Tessa whispered, "but this is the last time." I set the plate down on the counter. I didn't make a sound. The puzzle pieces clicked together with a deafening snap. Sam wasn't just sleeping with her, he was harvesting her. He had maxed out his credit. He had maxed out the company's credit. He had maxed out my credit fraudulently. Now, he needed a fresh host. Tessa Vaughn wasn't a strategic advisor. She was a fresh credit score. He was using her to float the loans that were paying for the lifestyle he was using to impress her. It was perverse. It was brilliant. It was doomed. I walked back out to the party. I saw Sam and Tessa re-enter the room. They were smiling. Sam looked triumphant. Tessa looked relieved, but there was a tightness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Marjorie walked up to me. "Delilah, honestly, you look exhausted. You're bringing down the mood. Why don't you take Eli home? Sam can stay. Tessa offered to give him a ride later so they can discuss the Asian market strategy." It was a dismissal, a banishment. I looked at Marjorie. I looked at Sam, who was pouring another glass of wine, acting like the king of Arizona. I looked at Tessa, who was checking her phone, probably looking at her bank balance. "You're right, Marjorie," I said, picking up my purse. "I am exhausted. It is hard work keeping track of everything." I walked over to Sam. I didn't kiss him. I didn't touch him. "I'm taking Eli," I said. "Don't stay out too late. You have a lot of paperwork to sign." He winked at me. "Don't wait up, D." I drove home in silence. Eli fell asleep in the back seat. The desert night was cool and dark. A feeling of absolute clarity washed over me. I had been worried about Sam fighting me for the assets. I had been worried he would drag out the divorce to hide his debts. But I was wrong. Sam didn't want to fight. He wanted to win. He needed to win. He needed to show Tessa, Marjorie, and the world that he was the victor, the one who kept the spoils. He needed the house and the company to prove to his new victim that he was solvent. If I fought him for the house, he would fight back to the death because he needed the house to secure the loans that were keeping him out of jail. If I gave him the house, he would take it. He would grab it with both hands. He would grab the house, the cars, the company, and the status, and with them, he would grab the liens, The second mortgages, the vendor debts, and the toxic loans he had just convinced Tessa to co-sign. He was acting out a tragedy, thinking it was a triumph. I pulled into the driveway of the house that wasn't really ours. I looked at the dark windows. "Okay, Sam," I whispered to the empty garage. "You want to be the big man. You want to be the genius investor. You want the girl and the gold." I turned off the engine. "I'm going to give you everything you asked for." The end of my marriage did not happen with a bang. There were no thrown vases, no tearful confessions at midnight, and no screaming matches in the driveway. It happened on a Tuesday evening over a plate of grilled asparagus and medium-rare ribeye, delivered with the casual, bureaucratic efficiency of a middle manager firing a redundant employee. Sam cut into his steak, chewed thoughtfully, and then wiped the corner of his mouth with a linen napkin. He didn't look at me. He looked at a spot on the wall just above my left shoulder. "Delilah," he said, his voice level and devoid of inflection. "I have been looking at the projections for the next quarter. I think it is time we restructure our arrangement." I paused, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. Restructure our arrangement. That was how he phrased it. Not, "I don't love you anymore." Not, "I am sleeping with my brand consultant." Just a corporate euphemism for emotional bankruptcy. "Are you talking about a divorce, Sam?" I asked. He sighed, the sound of a man burdened by the stupidity of those around him. "Yes, Delilah, a divorce. It's the only logical step. We have grown apart. My trajectory is vertical. Yours is stationary. It is an inefficiency we can no longer sustain." He took a sip of his Cabernet. "I have already drafted the term sheet," he continued. "I want this to be amicable. I don't want the lawyers draining the estate. So here's the offer." He laid it out like a business proposal. "I keep the house in Juniper Hills. It is my primary asset. And frankly, you can't afford the property taxes. I keep the cars, obviously, since they are leased through the company. I keep the entirety of Walker Dynamics and all associated holding accounts. I keep the investment portfolio because I am the one who built it." I watched him. He wasn't negotiating. He was dictating. "And you?" he said, gesturing at me with his fork. "You get the kid." The air in the room seemed to freeze. The kid. Not Eli. Not our son. Not the boy whose fever I had cooled 2 nights ago while Sam slept in the guest room. The kid. In that single syllable. Sam Walker severed the last thread of humanity that bound me to him. He didn't see a child. He saw a liability. He saw a line item that required maintenance, tuition, and time resources he preferred to allocate to Tessa and his ego. "You get full physical custody," Sam said, as if he were doing me a favor. "I will take visitation rights, of course, maybe every other weekend, but my schedule is going to be aggressive this year with the expansion, so we can be flexible. I will provide a stipend for his care. It won't be alimony. Delilah, you are young enough to work. Let's call it transition assistance. $2,000 a month for 2 years. $2,000. In a city where rent for a 2-bedroom apartment averaged $2,500. He looked at me, expecting tears. He expected me to beg. He expected the desperate housewife to plead for her lifestyle. I put my fork down. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I felt a cold, metallic clarity settle over me. "That sounds very thorough." "Sam," I said. He blinked, surprised by my lack of resistance. "Good. I knew you would be reasonable. I have retained Duncan Hale to handle the paperwork. He is expecting you at his office on Thursday." Duncan Hale. Everyone in Phoenix knew Duncan Hale. He was a legal pit bull in a $3,000 suit. He was the lawyer you hired when you didn't just want to win. You wanted to salt the earth so nothing would ever grow there again. Hiring Duncan Hale wasn't a defensive move. It was a declaration of war. Thursday morning. I drove to downtown Phoenix. I parked my Honda Civic between a Mercedes G-Wagon and a Bentley in the parking garage of the Tower Plaza. I didn't hire a lawyer, not yet. I walked into Duncan Hale's office alone. The office was designed to intimidate. It was all glass, chrome, and black leather. The view from the 34th floor looked down on the city like a god looking at ants. Duncan Hale sat behind a desk that was the size of a landing strip. He didn't stand up when I entered. He just gestured to a low, uncomfortable chair across from him. Sam sat next to him, looking bored, checking his emails on his phone. "Mrs. Walker," Duncan said. His voice was like gravel grinding in a mixer. "I'm glad you came alone. It shows maturity. Lawyers just complicate things, don't they?" He slid a document across the desk. It was heavy, bound in blue plastic. "This is the marital settlement agreement," Duncan said. "It reflects the terms Sam discussed with you. It is a generous offer, considering you have made zero financial contribution to the marriage for the last 7 years." I opened the document. I pretended to read it. In reality, I was scanning for specific keywords: indemnification, liability, asset allocation. Duncan leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. "Let me be clear. Delilah, if you contest this, if you hire counsel and try to drag this out, we will bury you. We will audit every grocery receipt you have spent in the last decade. We will allege financial mismanagement. We will drag your name through the mud until you are unhireable, and we will win. Sam has the resources. You have nothing." Sam finally looked up from his phone. "Just sign it. Dee, don't be difficult. I'm trying to give you a clean break. You don't want to be burdened with the complexities of my business assets anyway. You wouldn't understand the tax implications." I looked at Sam. He was so confident. He truly believed he was the smartest person in the room. He believed he was stripping me of my wealth, unaware that he was actually stripping me of his debts. I looked down at the table. I let my shoulders slump. I made myself look small. "I don't want to fight," I whispered. "I just want Eli to be safe." Duncan smiled, a predatory showing of teeth. "Smart girl. Take the papers. Read them. We need them signed by Monday." I took the papers. I walked out of the office, feeling their eyes on my back. I knew what they were saying as the door closed. Weak, pathetic, easy. Sam didn't stop at legal intimidation. He wanted to win the court of public opinion too. By Friday, the whispers had started. I went to pick up Eli from school. The other mothers, women I had hosted for book clubs and coffee mornings, turned away when I approached. I saw them huddled in a circle, glancing at me and then whispering. My phone pinged with a text from a friend who couldn't wait to deliver the poison. "Hey Dee, just wanted to give you a heads up. Sam is telling everyone at the club that you demanded millions and that you're trying to bankrupt the company out of spite. He says he offered to pay for your school, but you refused to work. Marjorie is telling people you have a gambling problem. A gambling problem." That was creative. It explained where the money went, the money Sam had actually torched on high-interest loans. He was projecting his own financial recklessness onto me. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. I let the rumors fester. Let them think I was greedy. Let them think I was unstable. The more they underestimated me, the less they would scrutinize the settlement. That afternoon, I finally made the call I had been saving for 3 years. I didn't call a billboard lawyer. I called Naomi Klein. Naomi was a legend in the compliance world, not the tabloid world. She didn't have a glass office downtown. She worked out of a converted brownstone in the historic district. She specialized in forensic divorce, finding money that men like Sam tried to hide. But I didn't need her to find money. I needed her to help me give it away. I sat in her office, which smelled of old books and peppermint tea. Naomi was a small woman, 60 years old, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind thick glasses. She listened to me for 40 minutes without interrupting. I told her everything: the drawer, the photos, the forged signatures, the shell companies, the Ponzi-like structure of Sam's debt. When I finished, Naomi took off her glasses and cleaned them slowly. "So," she said, "let me get this straight. You don't want alimony. You don't want the house. You don't want the business." "No," I said. She looked at me. "Then what do you want?" "Delilah." I leaned forward. "I want him to receive exactly what he asked for." I said. Naomi stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a grandmaster who has just realized her opponent has moved his queen into a trap. "You want to use the asset division as a liability dump." She said, "Exactly." I said, If he takes the assets, he takes the encumbrances attached to them, but I need it to be watertight. I need a clause that specifically waives his right to come back to me for contribution when the creditors come calling. I need a hold harmless agreement that is so broad it covers everything from the mortgage to the commercial loans he forged my name on. Naomi pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. If we do this, she said, her pen hovering over the paper, we have to be very careful. We can't conceal the debt. That would be fraud. We have to make sure the debt is disclosed in the schedules. But we have to frame the agreement so that he voluntarily assumes it because he believes the asset value outweighs it. He believes the company is worth $10 million. I said, he believes the house is worth $3 million. He is delusional. He thinks he can refinance his way out of this once he gets me off the title. Naomi nodded, scribbling furiously. So, we draft the agreement to give him sole ownership and sole liability, she said. We include a clause where he acknowledges that he has had the opportunity to inspect all financial records and waives any further discovery. We appeal to his arrogance. We make it look like a victory. She looked up at me. We aren't going to fight Duncan Hale, she said. We are going to open the door and let him run right off the cliff. We spent the weekend drafting. Naomi's language was precise, surgical. We didn't hide anything. We listed the loans. We listed the liens. But we listed them in the appendices, buried under pages of legal definitions, and then we added the key clause. Clause 14b. The husband, Samuel Walker, hereby assumes sole and absolute responsibility for all debts, liabilities, and obligations, whether known or unknown, associated with the Walker Dynamics entity and the real property located at Juniper Hills. The husband agrees to indemnify, defend, and hold the wife harmless from any and all claims arising from said assets. It was a death sentence, and it looked exactly like a trophy. On Monday morning, Naomi sent the revised draft to Duncan Hale. We attached a cover letter. It was short. Mr. Hale, my client is tired. She agrees to your terms. She surrenders all claims to the marital assets listed in your initial proposal, provided she is released from any administrative duties regarding the business or the property. She accepts the custody arrangement. She wants to sign immediately. I waited. I pictured Sam sitting in that glass office, reading the letter. I pictured him laughing. I pictured him turning to Duncan and saying, I told you she would fold. She doesn't have the stomach for a fight. He would see the surrender. He wouldn't read the indemnity. He wouldn't check the appendices where we had listed the unknown obligations. He was too busy planning his victory party with Tessa. My phone buzzed. An email from Duncan Hale. Accepted. Signing scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m. at the courthouse. I put the phone down. I looked at Eli, who was watching cartoons on the floor of the small apartment I had quietly rented the week before. Sam called him the kid. I looked at my son. He wasn't a kid. He was my reason. Sam wanted the kingdom. He could have it. I was about to give him the keys to a burning castle. And he was so blinded by the shine of the crown that he hadn't noticed the smoke. Wednesday was coming, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I was ready to say thank you. The document was 64 pages long. It sat on Naomi's mahogany desk like a sleeping viper, coiled and heavy. To the untrained eye, it was a standard marital settlement agreement, a boring brick of legalese designed to put an audience to sleep. But to me, it was a masterpiece of structural engineering. Naomi had drafted it with a specific psychological profile in mind, a narcissist in a hurry. We didn't hide anything. That was the beauty of the trap. Hiding assets or debts is illegal. It is fraud, and it gives the other party grounds to overturn the agreement later. We didn't want Sam to have grounds. We wanted him to have regrets. So, we put it all in, on page 12, under Article 4 Division of Real Property. We listed the Juniper Hills residence. We used the language Sam wanted. The husband is awarded sole and exclusive ownership, right, and title to the property. But then came the conjunctions. Subject to any and all existing encumbrances, liens, mortgages, and equity lines of credit, whether recorded or unrecorded, which the husband hereby assumes in their entirety. It looked standard. It looked like boilerplate. But the devil wasn't in the details. The devil was in the definitions. Naomi flipped to the back of the document. To Appendix D. Here, she said, tapping the paper with a manicured fingernail. This is the kill shot. Appendix D was a list of scheduled liabilities. It was dense. It was printed in 10-point font, and in that list, sandwiched between the car lease and the pool maintenance contract, were the loan numbers for the high-interest commercial debt I had photographed in his study. We listed the creditors. We listed the approximate balances. We didn't label them critical warning. We labeled them schedule of assumed business obligations. Sam would see the word business. He would think, of course I take the business debt. I'm taking the business. He wouldn't realize that by accepting the business debt in this specific document, he was personally indemnifying me against the guarantees he had forged. And then, there was Clause 22 waiver of discovery and independent appraisal. This was the lock on the cage. It stated that both parties acknowledged they had the right to demand a full forensic audit of the other's finances, to depose witnesses, and to hire independent appraisers. And it stated that the husband, Samuel Walker, knowingly, voluntarily, and irrevocably waives this right, declaring himself fully satisfied with his knowledge of the marital estate's value. If he signed this, he couldn't come back later and say, I didn't know how bad the debt was. The document would say, you had the chance to look, and you said no. We sent the draft to Duncan Hale on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the harassment campaign began. Sam didn't read the draft. I knew he wouldn't. He saw 64 pages and handed it to a junior associate to check for the assets. He was focused on the win, not the cost of the victory. But he was angry about the timing. He wanted this done yesterday. My phone started buzzing at 2 p.m. It was an email from Duncan Hale. The subject line was Urgent Delay Tactics. Ms. Klein, your client's draft is excessively voluminous. We are not rewriting the Constitution. We are dissolving a marriage where one party has 0 assets. Sam needs this finalized by the 30th. Any further delay will be viewed as bad faith negotiation, and we will file a motion to bifurcate. Naomi read the email and smiled. He is rattling the cage, she said. Let him rattle. Then came the personal attacks. At 4 o'clock, my mother-in-law, Marjorie, called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately, and a third time. I finally picked up, putting the phone on speaker as I folded Eli's laundry in the living room. Delilah, Marjorie's voice was shrill, vibrating with indignation. I just got off the phone with Sam. He is distraught. I smoothed out a superhero t-shirt. I am sorry to hear that. Marjorie, don't you play the saint with me, she snapped. You are dragging this out to hurt him. You know he has important investors watching this transition. You are making the family look messy. After everything we gave you, the house, the lifestyle, you are being incredibly ungrateful. I looked around the small apartment I was renting. It had beige carpet and a view of a dumpster, but it was paid for with my own money. I am not trying to be difficult. Marjorie, I said, my voice calm, flat, and polite. I just want to make sure everything is clear. I want Sam to have exactly what he deserves. He deserves to be free of a leech, she screamed. Sign the papers, Delilah. Or I swear, I will make sure you never show your face in Phoenix society again. She hung up. I felt a cold prickle of sweat on my neck, but not from fear, from anticipation. They were so loud. They were so convinced of their power. They had no idea they were screaming at a woman who was holding the detonator. Then, at 7 p.m, the pièce de résistance arrived. My phone chimed with a text message. It was from a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized the area code. Hi, Delilah. It's Tessa. Look, I know this is super awkward, and I'm sure you're hurting right now. Breakups are so hard. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. She was texting me as if we were sorority sisters, as if she hadn't been sleeping with my husband in my bed. I just wanted to reach out, woman to woman. The text continued. Sam is really stressed about the paperwork. He wants to move forward so everyone can heal. I know you want what's best for Eli. Maybe if you just signed, it would help bring closure. I'd love to be friends eventually for Eli's sake. OXO friends. So. For Eli's sake, I typed a reply. I deleted it. I typed another one. Thank you for your concern. Tessa. I wrote, I am reviewing the terms to ensure Sam gets full ownership. I want him to have the complete package. I hit send. The complete package. It wasn't a lie. The pressure was mounting. But it wasn't just emotional. Something felt wrong about the urgency. Why was the 30th of the month so important? Why was Duncan Hale sending emails in all caps? Why was Tessa, the cool girl, sending me texts begging for closure? I went to my laptop. I opened the encrypted browser and logged into the cloud account I had synced with Sam's iPad 6 months ago. He had changed his passwords, but he hadn't disabled the automatic backup for his downloads folder. I scrolled through the files from the last 48 hours. There it was, a PDF titled Venture Bridge Term Sheet, Series B Expansion. I opened it. I sat back in my chair. The timing was tight. Today was the 25th. If I stalled, I could ruin him right now. The deal would collapse. The creditors would swarm, and the assets would be seized. But if I did that, the bankruptcy court would get involved. They would freeze everything. They would scrutinize the timelines. They might look at me and ask why I didn't speak up sooner. No, I couldn't let him crash before the transfer. I needed him to crash after he owned it all. I needed the toxic waste to be legally, irrevocably, his property when the explosion happened. I needed to speed this up. I picked up the phone and called Naomi. Tell Duncan we are ready. I said. Naomi paused. Are you sure we could push for more indemnification language? No, I said. We have enough. He is desperate. Naomi, he needs this done by Monday. If we push too hard, he might crack and confess to the bank that he can't get the title. We need to give him the win. I want to sign on Friday, I told her. Friday. That's in 2 days. Tell him I'm tired of the fighting. Tell him Marjorie got to me. Tell him I just want to take my son and leave. Make me sound weak. Naomi chuckled. A dry, dark sound. You are terrifying. Delilah. I hung up. 10 minutes later, I received a notification. Duncan Hale had accepted the Friday appointment. The next 48 hours were a blur of silence. I didn't answer Marjorie's calls. I didn't reply to Tessa's follow-up texts asking if I had thought about it. I spent the time organizing. I packed the rest of my things from the Juniper Hills house, just clothes, Eli's toys, and my books. I left the furniture. I left the art. I left the expensive espresso machine Sam didn't know how to use. I walked through the house one last time. It was beautiful. It was cold. It was a tomb. I stood in the foyer, looking at the chandelier that cost $12,000. I remembered the day they installed it. Sam had shouted at the electricians because it was hanging 2 inches too low. It has to be perfect, he had said. Appearances are everything. Goodbye, Sam, I whispered to the empty air. On Friday morning, I met Naomi at the courthouse. She handed me the final bound copy of the agreement. It was heavy. I flipped through it. I checked page 12. Husband assumes sole liability. I checked Appendix D. The list of debts was there, looking like boring accounting data. I checked Clause 22, Waiver of Discovery. I took a small, yellow sticky note from my purse. I placed it on page 64, the signature page. I placed it so that the little yellow tab stuck out just slightly, inviting the hand to turn directly to the end. To skip the boring middle, to rush to the finish line. It was a small psychological nudge, a trick for a man who thought he was too smart to read the instructions. I closed the folder. It made a solid, final thud. Ready? Naomi asked. I smoothed my skirt. I checked my reflection in the glass door of the courthouse. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I didn't look like a wife. I'm ready, I said. We walked toward the elevators, up on the 4th floor. Sam was waiting. He was probably checking his watch. He was probably thinking about the $5 million. He was probably smiling. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button. As the doors closed, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness, it was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted. The feeling of a debt finally, fully paid. I wasn't just signing a divorce paper, I was signing an eviction notice for the ghost that had been haunting my life for 8 years. The elevator rose. Ding, 4th floor. Let the show begin. Just when I thought I had mapped every inch of the minefield Sam was standing on, I found a bomb I hadn't even known existed. It happened 3 days before the signing. I was sitting on the floor of my new, unfurnished living room in South Arroyo, using a cardboard box as a desk. The Wi-Fi had just been installed, and I was doing a final sweep of the public docket system, a habit I couldn't shake. I typed Walker Dynamics into the search bar of the Maricopa County Superior Court website, expecting to see nothing more than the usual contract disputes or permit filings. Instead, a new case number popped up. It was filed under seal, meaning the details were hidden from the general public to protect sensitive trade secrets or reputation during the initial phases. But the plaintiff wasn't a bank. It was a group called the Horizon Investment Trust. I knew that name. Horizon was a boutique investment group made up of retired doctors and engineers, people with too much money and not enough financial literacy. Sam had courted them aggressively 2 years ago for a Series A round of funding. I couldn't read the complaint because of the seal, but I could see the motion titles filed by the plaintiff's attorneys. Motion to compel discovery regarding misrepresentation of assets. Motion to freeze assets pending investigation. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a bad loan. This was a civil fraud lawsuit in the making. I immediately called Naomi. It was 8 in the evening, but she answered on the first ring. "I see it," she said, before I could even speak. "I was just about to call you. It looks like your husband promised the Horizon Group a 20% return based on a proprietary technology patent that doesn't actually exist." "He sold them vaporware," I asked, gripping the phone. "He sold them the future," Naomi corrected dryly. "And now that the future is here and the dividends aren't, they are suing. They are alleging that he falsified the quarterly reports to keep them investing." "Naomi," I said, my mind racing. "If this lawsuit goes public, the company is finished. The legal fees alone will drain the operating capital in a month." "Exactly," Naomi said. "And that is why this settlement agreement is your lifeboat. Listen to me carefully, Delilah. In the agreement we drafted, we defined liabilities to include any and all pending or threatened litigation, civil or criminal, known or unknown. If Sam signs that paper on Friday, he isn't just taking the company, he is taking the defendant's chair." I leaned back against the peeling paint of the rental apartment wall. It was worse than I thought. Sam wasn't just broke, he was potentially facing a class action scenario, and because he was the CEO and the primary shareholder, the liability would pierce the corporate veil and come straight for his personal assets. "He doesn't know they've filed. Does he?" I asked. "He knows they are angry," Naomi said. "He probably received a demand letter a month ago. That explains why he is so desperate for the $5 million from the new venture capital deal. He needs that new money to pay off the Horizon Group before they go public and destroy his reputation. He is trying to settle out of court." It was a Ponzi scheme. It was the classic structure. He was using the new $5 million to plug the hole left by the old investors, hoping to keep the ship afloat for one more quarter. "And he needs the house to get the $5 million, I whispered. "Bingo," Naomi said. "If you don't give him the house on Friday, the new deal collapses, the Horizon Group sues him publicly, the house of cards falls, but if you do give him the house, then he gets the money," I said. "He pays off Horizon. He survives." "For 6 months, maybe," Naomi said. "But here's the catch. Delilah, we found something else. I had my paralegal pull the original subscription agreements for the Horizon deal. Sam didn't just sign as CEO. He signed a bad boy guarantee." I gasped. A bad boy guarantee is a specific clause in commercial real estate and finance. It means that if the borrower commits a fraudulent act like lying about assets or misappropriating funds, the limited liability protection is stripped away, and the borrower becomes fully, personally liable for the entire debt, plus damages. So, I said, if the Horizon Group proves he lied, they can take everything, the house, the cars, the watch on his wrist. And if you are still married to him when that judgment comes down, Naomi said, her voice grave, they can come after community assets. They could come after your savings. They could come after you. I need to sign, I said. I need to sign now. We stick to the plan, Naomi said. Friday, let him think he's winning. If he suspects you know about the lawsuit, he might get spooked and freeze. We need him arrogant. We need him to think he is buying your silence, not inheriting his own execution. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer scale of the deception. Sam had built a castle out of dynamite, and he was currently sitting in the living room lighting a match. The next morning, I met Brooke at a coffee shop 3 towns over. I wore oversized sunglasses and a hat. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad spy movie. But I couldn't risk running into anyone from the club. Brooke handed me a thick envelope. I did what you asked, she said, pushing a blueberry muffin toward me. I traced the IP addresses for the DocuSign logs on the 3 loans where your signature appears. I opened the envelope. Inside were pages of server logs, highlighted in yellow. On March 12th, when the spousal consent form was signed, Brooke explained, pointing to a line of code. The digital signature originated from an IP address registered to the Walker Dynamics server in downtown Phoenix, specifically, the executive suite router. I was at Eli's swim meet that day, I said. I have the geotagged photos on my phone to prove it. I was 10 miles away. Exactly, Brooke said. And for the second loan, the one in November. The signature came from a mobile device, an iPhone 15 Pro Max. I have an iPhone 13, I said. Sam has the 15. We have him, D, Brooke said. This is forensic proof of identity theft. If the bank ever tries to come after you for those loans, you show them this. You prove that you physically could not have signed those documents. It exonerates you completely. I touched the papers. This was my shield. While the settlement agreement was my sword, this was the armor that would keep me safe when the shrapnel started flying. Thank you, Brooke, I said. There is one more thing, Brooke said, hesitating. She pulled another sheet of paper from her bag. While I was digging through the corporate filings for the new venture deal, the one he is trying to close next week, I noticed a name on the beneficiary list. I looked at the paper. It was a breakdown of the finder's fees for the new $5 million loan. Consulting fee payable to V Strategy Group, LLC, amount $150,000. Who is V Strategy Group? I asked. I looked up the LLC registration, Brooke said. It was formed 3 weeks ago in Delaware. The managing member is Tessa Vaughn. I stared at the name, Tessa. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Tessa wasn't just pushing Sam to settle the divorce because she was insecure about our relationship. She wasn't just a girlfriend wanting her man to be free. She was a broker. She was getting a $150,000 commission for landing this new loan. That was why she was texting me. That was why she was so desperate for me to sign by the 30th. If the deal didn't close, she didn't get paid. She was just as leveraged as Sam. She probably had debts of her own, the fake bracelet, the leased car, the lifestyle she couldn't afford. She needed that commission to pay her own creditors. Oh my God, I whispered. She isn't his mistress. She's his accomplice. They are feeding off each other, Brooke said, shaking her head. He needs her connections to get the money. She needs his assets to secure the commission. They are a snake eating its own tail. I felt a sudden, strange surge of pity. Not for Sam, he knew what he was doing, but for Tessa. She thought she was playing a sophisticated game. She thought she was manipulating a wealthy man into giving her a payday. She didn't realize that the money she was chasing didn't exist. She was fighting to get a commission on a loan that would inevitably default, implicating her in the fraud. If I warned her, she would tell Sam. If she told Sam, the deal would stop. I had to let her jump off the cliff with him. I drove back to South Arroyo. The apartment was small. It was a one-bedroom unit in a complex painted a peeling shade of desert beige. The carpet smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old dust. The neighbors on the left argued loudly about football. The neighbor on the right played mariachi music until 10 at night. It was loud. It was cramped. It was absolutely imperfect. And I loved it. For the first time in 8 years. I wasn't guarding a museum. I was living in a home. I had bought a secondhand sofa from Craigslist. I had bought dishes from Target. I had bought Eli a bed with a superhero comforter that clashed with the curtains. And I didn't care because he loved it. That evening, I sat Eli down on the floor. We were eating pizza out of the box, something Sam never allowed because grease ruins the aesthetic. Eli, I said, wiping a smudge of tomato sauce from his chin, we need to talk about tomorrow. Eli looked up, his eyes wide and watchful. He had sensed the tension for weeks. Kids always know. Are we going back to the big house? He asked, his voice small. No, baby, I said. We aren't going back there. Dad is going to keep the big house. This is our house now. Eli looked around the tiny living room. It's small. It is, I agreed. But do you know what else it is? It's ours. Nobody's going to tell us not to touch the walls here. Nobody's going to tell us to be quiet because they are on a phone call. We can make a mess here. Eli, we can build forts. Eli thought about this. Can I put my Lego sets on the floor? Even the big ones? You can cover the entire floor in Legos, I promised. As long as you don't make me step on them, he giggled. It was a genuine sound, light and unburdened. Is Dad coming here? He asked. Sometimes, I said carefully. He will come to pick you up on weekends. He loves you very much. Eli, but Dad has a lot of work to do. He has some big projects that take up all his time, so you and I are going to be a team for a while. Just the two of us. I didn't tell him his father was a crook. I didn't tell him his father had sold our security for a pittance of validation. I would never poison Eli against Sam. Sam would do that himself. In time, with his own actions, my job was to be the safety net when the fall finally happened. Okay, Eli said, grabbing another slice of pepperoni. I like this pizza better than the green stuff Dad makes us eat. Me too, buddy, I said. Me too. After Eli went to sleep, I sat by the window, looking out at the streetlights flickering on the asphalt. The view wasn't a manicured golf course. It was a parking lot and a recycling center. But to me, it looked like freedom. I checked my email on my burner phone one last time. There was a new message in my personal inbox. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't from Sam. It was from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Dear Ms. Wright, we are pleased to inform you that your application for the Certified Forensic Accountant program has been accepted. Your high score on the entrance assessment indicates a strong aptitude for investigative analysis. Classes begin next month. I stared at the screen. Ms. Wright, not Mrs. Walker, not Sam's wife. I was Delilah Wright. I was 35 years old. I had $700 in my secret account, a rented apartment, and a car that needed new tires. But as I closed the phone and turned off the light, I realized I was richer than Sam Walker had ever been. He had millions in debt and a mistress who was billing him by the hour. I had the truth. I went to the bedroom, where my court clothes were laid out for the morning, the charcoal dress, the sensible heels. I reached into the pocket of the dress and pulled out the lipstick I planned to wear. It wasn't the pale nude shade Sam preferred. It was a deep, bold berry color. I placed it on the dresser. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just be signing a contract, I would be closing the case file. I closed my eyes and slept the sleep of the righteous. The night before the hearing, I sat at the laminate kitchen table in my new apartment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. It was 11 o'clock. The document lay before me. 64 pages. I didn't need to read it again. I had memorized every comma, every clause, every indented paragraph. But I went through it anyway. I wasn't checking for mistakes. I was checking for the trap doors. I ran my finger down the spine of the binder. I checked the sticky note I had placed on the signature page. It was bright yellow, innocent, helpful. It stuck out just enough to say, "Sign here." A visual shortcut for a man who hated details. I turned back to Appendix D. The font was small, the spacing tight, to a casual reader. It looked like a standard list of liabilities, the boring administrative debris of a marriage ending. But to me, it looked like a map of a minefield. Item 42, commercial note. Southwest Lenders. Item 43, vendor obligation. Microtech Industries. Item 44, unresolved litigation claims pending against Walker Dynamics. I touched the words. They were legally precise. They were absolutely truthful, and that was why they were deadly. We weren't lying to Sam. We were relying on the fact that Sam would lie to himself. He would look at this list and see business expenses that he could manage with his genius intellect. He wouldn't see that he was signing a confession. I closed the binder. The snap of the ring sounded like a pistol slide racking into place. I remembered Naomi's voice from our call earlier that afternoon. She had sounded calm, almost bored, which was her way of being intense. "Remember, Delilah," she had said, "this only works if he feels superior. If he smells even a whiff of resistance, he will dig in. He will read the fine print. He needs to believe he is doing you a favor by taking the assets. You have to be the charity case." I stood up and walked to the bedroom. The door was ajar. I pushed it open silently. Eli was asleep. He was sprawled out on the mattress, one leg kicked over the duvet, his mouth slightly open. He was breathing the deep, rhythmic breath of the innocent. The superhero nightlight cast a soft blue glow across his face. I stood there for a long time. Leaning against the doorframe, a sudden, sharp pain twisted in my chest. It wasn't regret. I didn't regret leaving Sam. It was the grief of the dream. I was grieving the family I thought I was building 8 years ago. I was grieving the idea that my son would have a father who looked at him and saw a person, not a prop. I looked at Eli's hands, small and relaxed. Tomorrow, I was going to sever his life from the wealth he had been born into. I was going to take him from a world of country clubs and private tutors to a world of public school and budgeting for pizza. Am I stealing from him? The doubt whispered. Then I remembered the bad boy guarantee. I remembered the lawsuits. I remembered the desperate, frantic loans Sam was taking out just to keep the lights on. I wasn't stealing Eli's inheritance. I was saving him from inheriting a crater. If I stayed, if I fought for my share, the bankruptcy courts would drag us both down. They would seize Eli's college fund. They would garnish my wages for years. I wasn't taking a boy out of a palace. I was taking a boy out of a building that was already on fire, even if he couldn't smell the smoke yet. I walked over and pulled the duvet up over his shoulder. "We're going to be okay," I whispered to the dark. "It's going to be hard, but we're going to be free." I went back to the living room and poured a glass of water. I sat by the window, looking out at the empty parking lot. For years, people had told me I was quiet. Sam used to say it like a complaint. "Delilah, why don't you say something? You're like a piece of furniture." I used to think silence was a weakness. I used to think it meant I was afraid. But sitting there in the dark, watching the headlights of a passing car sweep across the ceiling, I realized the truth. Silence isn't empty. Silence is a container. For 3 years, I had filled my silence with data. I had filled it with bank statements, credit reports, and legal statutes. I had filled it with the observation of his habits, his passwords, his arrogance. If I had screamed, if I had fought back, if I had demanded respect, Sam would have seen me. He would have recognized me as a threat. He would have raised his defenses, but because I was silent, he thought I was stupid. And because he thought I was stupid, he left the drawer unlocked. He left the iPad on the counter. He left the breadcrumbs that led me straight to the guillotine rope he was holding. "Silence is not surrender," I said aloud, testing the weight of the words. "Silence is the sound of the hunter waiting for the shot." I finished the water. I washed the glass and set it in the drying rack. I went to bed. But I set my alarm for 5 in the morning. I wanted to be awake before the sun. I wanted to be the one who started the day. The morning arrived with the brutal, bright heat of the Arizona summer. I moved through the routine with mechanical precision. I woke Eli up. I made oatmeal. I checked his backpack to make sure he had his homework. "Eat up, buddy," I said, pouring him orange juice. "We have to leave a little early today." "Why?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mom has a meeting," I said. "A boring adult meeting. You're going to hang out with Aunt Brooke for a few hours. She said something about donuts." Eli perked up. "Glazed." "Whatever you want," I said. I didn't let my hands shake as I tied his shoes. I didn't let my voice crack. I was a calm, boring mother doing calm, boring things. I was the baseline. If I panicked, he would panic. We drove to Brooke's house. My Honda Civic rattled slightly when the air conditioning kicked on. It was 8 years old, and the paint was fading on the hood. When we pulled into Brooke's driveway, she was waiting on the porch. She looked at me, and I saw the question in her eyes. "Are you ready?" I nodded once. I kissed Eli on the forehead. "Be good. I'll pick you up after lunch." "Love you, Mom," he said, already running toward the promise of sugar. I watched the door close behind him, then I got back in the car. I adjusted the rear-view mirror. I checked my lipstick, the deep berry shade that looked like armor. "Okay," I said. "Let's go to court." The drive to the courthouse took 20 minutes. I didn't listen to the radio. I drove in silence, visualizing the next hour. I visualized Sam's face. I visualized the pen in his hand. I visualized the moment the ink touched the paper. I pulled into the parking garage. It was crowded, but I found a spot on the 4th level, and then I saw it, parked 3 spots away, straddling the white line as if the rules of geometry didn't apply to it, was Sam's car, the vintage Porsche 911. It was gleaming, polished to a mirror shine. It looked aggressive, expensive, and loud. It was a statement. I am here, I am rich, I am winning. I parked my Honda next to a dented Ford truck. I grabbed my purse and the heavy binder. I walked toward the elevator. My heels clicked on the concrete. Click, click, click. The elevator ride up was slow. My heart was beating a steady, heavy rhythm, like a war drum. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, the hallway was cool and smelled of floor wax. I saw them immediately. They were standing near the double doors of courtroom 4B. Sam was leaning against the wall, looking relaxed. He was wearing a suit that I knew cost $3,000. He was checking his watch, tapping his foot, radiating an energy of impatient superiority. Next to him was Duncan Hale. The lawyer looked like a shark that had just eaten a seal and was picking his teeth. He was laughing at something Sam said, a fake, oily laugh. And then there was Tessa. I almost stopped walking. She was wearing a dress that belonged at a cocktail party. Not a divorce hearing. It was royal blue, silk, with a neckline that plunged just a little too deep for 10 a.m. She had done her hair in elaborate waves. She was wearing the fake Cartier bracelet. She looked like she was attending a gala. She looked like she was ready to walk a red carpet. It was a performance. They had all dressed up for the finale of the Delilah is a Loser show. They wanted me to see them looking beautiful and rich. They wanted me to feel small, gray, and erased. I kept walking. Naomi was standing a few feet away from them, holding her briefcase. She looked small, dowdy in her beige suit, invisible next to their glamour. But when she saw me, her eyes locked onto mine. They were sharp as flint. I walked up to her. "They look happy," I whispered. Naomi didn't look at them. She looked at the binder in my hand. "They are celebrating," Naomi said, her voice low. "They think they are the audience. They think they came here to watch you lose." She paused, and a small, dangerous smile touched her lips. "They don't realize," she said. "You didn't come here to compete, Delilah. You came here to conclude." Sam saw us. He pushed off the wall and walked over. He didn't offer a hand. He just grinned. That wide, winning grin, that had charmed investors out of millions. "Morning, Dee," he said. "Glad you made it on time. Traffic can be a bitch in that old car of yours." Tessa giggled. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Hi, Delilah." "You look comfortable." "I am," I said. Duncan Hale checked his Rolex. "Shall we? The judge has a full docket. Let's get this signed so we can all move on with our lives." "Please," Sam said, gesturing to the courtroom door with mock chivalry. "After you, Delilah. Ladies first." He was enjoying this. He was savoring the moment of ushering me out of his life. I looked at the heavy wooden door. Behind that door was a judge who would ask me if I understood what I was giving up. Behind that door was the end of my marriage, but also behind that door was the trap. I shifted the binder in my arms. I felt the weight of the evidence, the photos, the forensic logs, and the 64 pages of indemnification. I looked at Sam one last time. I looked at the confidence in his eyes, the arrogance in his stance. He had no idea that he was standing on a trap door, and I was holding the lever. "Thank you, Sam," I said. He blinked, confused by the repetition of the phrase. Sure." I turned and pushed the door open. The air inside the courtroom was cold and smelled of old paper. I stepped across the threshold. To anyone watching, I looked like a woman walking into a lion's den, armed with nothing but a binder, but they didn't know what was in the binder. I walked to the plaintiff's table. I set the document down. The game was over. It was time to score the points. Honorable Justice Miller adjusted his glasses, looking down at me from the bench with an expression that sat somewhere between pity and confusion. The courtroom was silent, save for the hum of the ventilation system and the aggressive tapping of Tessa's heel against the floor. "Ms. Wright," the judge said, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room, "I want to confirm one final time for the record. You are knowingly and voluntarily waiving your claim to 50% of the marital estate. This includes the residence at Juniper Hills, the entirety of the Walker Dynamics shares, the investment accounts, and the vehicles. You understand that under Arizona law, you are entitled to an equitable division, yet you are accepting," he paused, glancing at the summary page. "Effectively nothing. Is this correct?" I stood up. My legs felt light, as if gravity had momentarily loosened its grip. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the tremor they all expected. "I understand completely. I just want a clean break." I heard Marjorie let out a sharp, derisive puff of air behind me. I could feel her thinking. Weak. She was always weak. The judge turned his gaze to the other table. "Mr. Walker, your counsel has indicated that you have declined the opportunity for an independent forensic appraisal of the business assets and liabilities." Sam stood up, smoothing the lapels of his navy suit. He flashed that charming, practiced smile, the one that had disarmed investors and deceived me for a decade. "That is correct, Your Honor." Sam said, "I founded Walker Dynamics in my garage. I know every bolt, every contract, and every dollar in that building. I don't need to pay a stranger $10,000 to tell me what my own empire is worth. I am fully satisfied with the valuation." Duncan Hale, Sam's lawyer, leaned toward the microphone. He looked bored, ready for his lunch reservation. "We would just like the record to reflect, Your Honor, that Mr. Walker is a sophisticated businessman and waives all rights to future discovery regarding the estate's value. We are ready to sign." The judge nodded, looking weary. "Very well. Proceed with the execution of the settlement." The bailiff brought the binder to Sam's table first. This was the moment. I watched Sam. He didn't pick up the document to read it. He picked up his pen, a Mont Blanc fountain pen, heavy and pretentious. He flipped to the signature tabs Naomi and I had marked. "Sign here. Flip. Sign here. Flip." He was signing with a flourish, the loops of his name large and arrogant. He wasn't reading a single word. Why would he? He thought he had written the terms. He thought I had capitulated. Next to him, Tessa was beaming. She leaned over and whispered something in his ear, probably asking if the funds for the new loan would clear by the afternoon so she could collect her commission. She looked at me with a triumphant, pitying smile. She thought she was watching a funeral for my life. She didn't know she was watching a demolition. Sam reached the final page, the page with the yellow sticky note. He signed it. Samuel J. Walker. He capped the pen with a loud, decisive click. Done, Sam announced, pushing the binder away as if it were a finished meal. Duncan Hale reached out to organize the papers. He was smiling, likely calculating his final billable hours. His hand brushed against Appendix D, the section right before the signature page Sam had just breezed past. Duncan's eyes caught something. Maybe it was the font size, maybe it was the length of the list, or maybe it was the specific phrase civil litigation indemnity. He froze. His smile didn't fade. It dropped off his face like a stone. He pulled the binder closer. He flipped back a page, then another. He read Clause 14b. I saw the color drain from his face. It was a physical transformation, from a healthy tan to a sickly, paste-like gray. Sam, Duncan whispered. His voice was no longer the growl of a pit bull. It was the squeak of a mouse caught in a trap. Sam, did you read the schedule of assumed liabilities? Sam was busy winking at Marjorie. What, it's just the mortgage and the car leases? Duncan, we went over this? No, Duncan hissed. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide with sudden, terrifying recognition. He looked at Naomi, who was sitting beside me, serene as a sphinx. Duncan looked back at the document. This lists everything. Sam, you just indemnified her against the Horizon lawsuit. You assumed the bad boy guarantee on the Southwest loan. Sam frowned. What are you talking about? Horizon is under seal. She doesn't know about Horizon. Naomi stood up. Her timing was impeccable. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the rising murmur like a knife. Since the papers are executed, we would like to formally enter the indisputable transfer of liability into the record, per Clause 14b and Appendix D. Mr. Walker has assumed sole responsibility for all debts listed, totaling roughly $840,000 in immediate commercial obligations, as well as full personal liability for the pending civil fraud litigation referenced as Case Number CV2026. The room went dead silent. It was the kind of silence that follows a gunshot. Sam looked at Naomi, then he looked at Duncan. Fraud litigation, Tessa voiced, her voice shrill. What fraud litigation? Duncan was frantically flipping through the appendix. It's here, he stammered. It's all here. The vendor debts, the shell company loans, the personal guarantees. It says he swallowed hard. It says the wife is held harmless, and the husband assumes full payment obligations immediately upon execution of this decree. Sam stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. That is a lie, he shouted. I didn't sign that. She tricked me. The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Walker, sit down. I didn't agree to take the debt, Sam yelled, his face turning a mottled red. I agreed to take the assets. I wanted the company. I wanted the house. You have the house, Mr. Walker, Judge Miller said, his voice cold. And according to the document you just signed after explicitly waiving your right to read it or have it appraised, you also have the mortgage, the liens, and the lawsuits attached to it. Sam turned to Duncan. Fix this. You're the lawyer. Fix it. Duncan looked defeated. He knew the law. He knew that a voluntary waiver, signed by a sophisticated party who refused due diligence, was ironclad. Sam, Duncan said quietly, you told the judge you knew what the company was worth. You told him you didn't need to look. Tessa stood up. Her royal blue dress suddenly looked like a costume. Wait, she said, her voice trembling. If he has the debt, does he have the equity? Sam, what about the $5 million? The venture deal closes tomorrow. Right? We need the house title to get the loan. I looked at Tessa. This was the moment I had to deliver the final mercy, which was actually the final knife. There is no equity, Tessa, I said softly. She spun around to look at me. The house is leveraged to 110% of its value. I continued, speaking clearly so the whole room could hear. The company has a negative cash flow, and with the Horizon lawsuit now unsealed and attached to his personal assets, Any new lender will pull their offer within 24 hours. I looked at Sam. There is no $5 million. Sam, there never was. You were just digging a deeper hole to stand in. Sam looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He slumped back into his chair. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The realization washed over him not just the financial ruin, but the sheer, absolute humiliation of it. He had thought he was the predator. He had thought he was stripping me bare. Instead, he had just signed a document that legally transferred an anchor from my neck to his. Marjorie stood up. She looked at her son, then at the list of debts Duncan was holding. "You told me you were solvent," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "You told me the company was booming. You borrowed $50,000 from my retirement fund last month." Sam. Sam put his head in his hands. Judge Miller looked at the papers one last time. "The settlement is approved." The judge ruled. "The court finds the waiver was knowing and voluntary. The assets and their corresponding liabilities are awarded to Mr. Walker. Miss Wright is absolved of all financial claims. Case closed." The gavel banged. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I stood up. I picked up my purse. Sam looked up at me. His eyes were red, filled with hate and fear. "You planned this," he hissed. "You knew." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had treated me like an employee in my own life. I looked at the man who had forged my signature to steal my credit. "I didn't take a single penny from you. Sam," I said, "I let you keep everything you built. I just gave you back the consequences you tried to hide." I turned to walk away, then stopped. I looked at Tessa, who was frantically typing on her phone, likely trying to cancel the bridge loan she had personally guaranteed for her commission. I looked at Marjorie, who was clutching her purse as if afraid Sam might ask for more money. I looked back at Sam. "Thank you," I said, and then I walked out. The aftermath was swift and brutal. It didn't take years. It took weeks. When the Horizon lawsuit went public, the investors panicked. They demanded an immediate audit. The new venture capital firm in San Francisco saw the filing and pulled the term sheet for the $5 million loan within 48 hours. Without the new cash, Sam couldn't pay the old loans. The house of cards collapsed. The creditors descended on the Juniper Hills estate like vultures. The house was foreclosed upon 3 months later. I heard it sold at auction for less than the outstanding mortgage. Walker Dynamics filed for Chapter 7's liquidation. The proprietary technology turned out to be nothing more than smoke and mirrors. Sam faced criminal charges for the fraud against the investors. He avoided jail time by taking a plea deal that banned him from ever serving as a director of a public company again. He lost his Porsche. He lost his watch. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a bad part of town, a place much smaller and darker than the one I had rented. Tessa Vaughn didn't stick around for the downfall. The moment the commission check evaporated, so did she. I heard she moved to Los Angeles, looking for a new visionary to consult for. And Marjorie. She stopped speaking to Sam. To her, failure was the only unforgivable sin. As for me, I walked out of that courthouse and drove to pick up Eli. We went for donuts. We sat on the hood of my car, eating glazed rings and watching the airplanes take off from Sky Harbor. I didn't become a millionaire overnight. I didn't meet a handsome prince. Real revenge isn't a fairy tale. It is the reclamation of reality. I finished my certification. I became a forensic accountant. I now work for a firm that specializes in helping women find the assets their husbands try to hide. I drive a newer car now, a Toyota, reliable and paid for in cash. Eli is 10 now. He sees Sam every other weekend, but the visits are short. Sam is a different man, bitter, quiet, shrunken. He doesn't take photos for Facebook anymore. Sometimes, late at night. I look at the copy of the settlement agreement I keep in my safe. I look at that signature, Samuel J. Walker. I don't look at it with anger. I look at it with gratitude. He taught me the most important lesson of my life. A cage is only a cage if you don't know you hold the key. He tried to take everything. I smiled and said thank you. And in the end, He was the one who paid the bill. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed Delilah's journey from silence to strategy. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from New York, London, Sydney, or somewhere else? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Sam's downfall. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to the Juliet Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people have exactly what they asked for.